Hi, I'm Andy Wood, TQ Zine and TQ-NAUT.
Hi, it's David Howcroft and it's NAUT and TQ-NAUT.
And I'm Marianne from the Old Police House. So Andy, can you tell me a little bit about TQ Zine and its history?
Yeah, it started about 3 years ago. I from early teens, I've always been reading about music, fascinated about reading about it, not just about listening to it and watching live performances. And I enjoyed writing as well, not particularly about music, but I did do some music stuff. And I thought, well, maybe I can combine both, write about music and not just listening to it, but writing about it and getting people interested in what I was interested in. I mulled it over for about 4 months, early 2017, and I knew that initially it was going to cost me some money. So I eventually plucked up courage to speak to Mrs. TQ, and my original thought was to go with 4 pieces of foolscap stapled in the corner. And it was Joe who said, you can do better than that. So TQ1 was launched July 2017. I went to a lot of people asking if they would give me postal addresses of people who were into the scene that I suppose was no audience, but I'm not sure I knew that was the phrase at the time. And I ended up sending 170 copies around the world.
Just a couple.
And it was that I knew was going to be the expense attached to it.
Yeah.
And if it flopped, it was an expense that I could bear. It didn't flop. I got a lot of positive comments. I thought, we'll go for another issue. So it kicked off, and it was a monthly fanzine. And whilst most of the pieces initially were written by myself, and it was mainly just odd comments and observations and a few album reviews, single reviews, I then thought about widening it out. And because there was such a lot of interest, I put feelers out to see if anybody would care to write or would care to be interviewed. And it's just gone crazy. It goes out to almost 20 countries. I've got about 190 subscribers, and the feedback I get is immense and extremely humbling. And it dawned on me, and it continues to dawn on me every time I put an issue out. It re-dawns, if you like, that there are people out there who love to read about the stuff that I love to write about. And that's just fantastic. People will send me stuff saying, can you review this? A bit like John Peel, I promise to listen to everything I'm sent. Sometimes people have to wait weeks before I get back to them. I think people are tuned into what I'm trying to do, because the bulk of what I get sent to consider ends up in the fanzine. Very little do I reject in terms of going into the fanzine, but I always give some feedback, even if it's stuff that I don't particularly like. Feedback in a positive way. It's really easy to be negative about stuff, and the world's shitty enough without me writing a 28-page fanzine that's full of negative comments. As I say, I have been sent stuff that I've rejected in a very kindly manner.
So Andy, could you tell me a little bit about some of the writers for TQ Zine?
Yeah, as I said, it initially started off with just myself, and then I suppose a huge group of virtual friends was amassed. And the key players now are from issue 2. Ash Cook from Wales contacted me and said that he'd be interested in designing a cover and maybe a logo if I was interested in that. I had a comment from a small independent record shop that was distributing in Nottingham for me, and he said that it really misses a cover. So Ash's timing was perfect. So Ash really designed most of the initial year's covers. But I've got a lot of people volunteering to put covers, to give me covers, and I've got a library of covers now, which I'm pretty excited about. I put a call out for an artist, an illustrator, on Twitter a couple of years ago, saying, look, I want a cartoon strip for TQ. Anybody willing to help out? And I got nothing. And then I happened to mention that about a year ago to Chris Whitehead, who lives in Whitby in Yorkshire, and he said, "Oh, I can do illustrations. Are you interested?" And he's now TQ resident illustrator, and the feedback that him and I get about his cartoons is just so positive, and he's a multi-talented guy. So Chris is in every issue. Recently, behind the scenes, Darren Holloway, who's a musician from the South Coast, he does some behind the scenes work for me on the TQ Zine blog site. Something which maybe it's an age thing, maybe it's an interest thing. I could do it, but I can't be bothered. So Darren is a great support with that. And I try not to have the same writers in each issue, because I think that's just over familiar, really. But there are some people who will just drop an idea, and I'll go with it. There are some people from the northeast who do that. Joe Murray, aka Posset, he's always up for reviewing stuff, and I always welcome Joe's input. I've had people from Australia sending me stuff from all over the world, and sometimes people will send me a completed article. Sometimes someone will say, "Hey, I've got a chance of interviewing X, would you be interested?" And sometimes I haven't got a clue who X is, so I do a bit of research, and so far so good. And my granddaughter even did, in one of the earlier issues, did a review of a Little Mix concert.
Oh yeah.
And of course, I shouldn't forget the fact that behind the scenes, as well as Darren, we've got Jo, my wife, who puts up with a lot of shit.
Oh, it's love. It's love.
It's love. And I have to say, if it wasn't for her,
Yeah.
TQ Zine would not be the way it looks and feels now.
Yeah.
So I've got some regular contributors, but I've got some people who are writing stuff now, ready for an issue about 3 or 4 months down the line. It's great.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah. So I've just dispatched TQ-32. TQ-33 dispatches first week in October, and that's a bit special, which I'm sharing with no one at the moment. And there's a bunch of people working on TQ-50, which is going to be extremely special. But
I can believe it.
I can say no more about that, but that's probably 18 months, 2 years down the line, assuming that we're all still well enough and enthusiastic enough to continue doing what we're doing, and I'm sure we are.
I don't doubt it.
So that's TQ in a nutshell.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks about that.
You're welcome.
It means a great deal to us at the Police House that that you've reviewed and you've come along and written about us. You interviewed us, and also Chris's comic of us at the old Police House. It is obviously a firm favourite of mine, as it's my profile picture on Twitter.
It is.
Been immortalised in comic. I never thought that would ever happen to me.
It is indeed. I remember when I saw your new profile pic, and I thought, that's Chris's work out of TQ. So that's great. As I said before, we get some very positive comments about Chris's work.
Oh yeah. David, can you tell me where the name TQ-NAUT came from?
Yeah, it's a bit of a long-winded answer, that, so I'll try and keep it really short and sweet. I'd had a lot of help returning back to listening to music, having had quite a serious head injury accident on a mountain bike, and people who know me know all about that. But part of getting back to music, I was supported and helped by a couple of friends out of Blythe. And when I came back to the scene to listen to music, I would say I found it a little bit strange in that when you went through the door, you paid your money, there was only a few people in the audience. And that led to me talking to people and probing what was going on, because I wondered whether it was location or whether it was just lack of advertising. When I started to realise that it was about the scene, and I read an article by Rob Hurler about what a phrase he used called no audience underground, and immediately I read that, I thought, yeah, that's what I'm existing in here at the moment. It's an audience, but it's no audience, because you can go to a gig, say, in one venue, and there'll be 5 people there. Then you can go to a gig in another venue, and there will be, say, 10 people there, but they're distributed out in 3 rooms. So you get that feeling that there's not a lot of people participating in it, but in actual fact, what you're seeing when you go there is high quality in interaction. So I quite like that, and so I contacted Rob Hurler and said, look, Rob, basically, I've got this idea. I'd like to archive the scene that I'm coming back to, because it has very much changed from what it used to be like. I'd got into the idea of archiving because I was helping do some research for a book which is going to be written about the punk explosion in Newcastle in the northeast of England. That's by Richard Rupinas, and it's going to be surprisingly called Gob on the Tyne. You can't think of a more fitting title for a book from about punks gobbing on the Tyne. Which I have to say, I've spent plenty of time doing that back in the day. There's a phrase which I don't like to use very often, back in the day. But anyhow, when you actually start interviewing people who are in bands, and I'm just going to wax lyrical about a couple of bands, so you might go for like Arthur Two-Stroke and the Chart Commandos, or you might go for Penetration, or you might go for Punishment of Luxury, or you might branch out of that and go and talk about Larry Hack. And Larry Hack was one of the great punk movers when I first moved up to Newcastle in 1977. When you start interviewing these people, you suddenly realise how collective memory has faded, but there's not a lot of material available to explain to you what it was like. And that's where I think archiving sort of fits in. So the label, TQ-NAUT, is really an archiving label. And the idea is to capture what that band and what that scene was like on that night on a recording. And over the years, I've built up, I say, around about 120 releases.
Just a few then?
Well, just a few, but they all fit together, and that's interesting about an archive. You get not 120, not 121, and then you get not 119 and 117 or 47, and they all fit together because as you work through them and you look at them, you can see how things change, and you can pick up on changes in style and things that are happening. And I just felt it was important that someone captured that. As I made progress with it, I thought, if it's just an archiving label and it's not a bootleg label, because it's not a bootleg label, I don't really want to be charging for the recordings, because that would put it into a bootleg, and I might get someone come along and say, oh yeah, well, you're making money off it, so you can't release that. I don't mind someone saying you can't put anything out by me because I want ownership of it and I don't want recordings going out. I'm happy to do that.
Do you make it a point about NAUT to not charge for tapes and postage?
Yeah, I do. That's really important to me, because, you see, people do ask me that. Sometimes they ask me that in gigs, when they ask if they can get a NAUT tape, and I'll say, yeah, I'll sort an outfit. And then they'll say, how much do you want for it? And I'll say, I don't want anything. And then they'll come back to me and they'll say, why not? And my always pat answer, particularly on email, is I email them back and say, give me a reason why I should charge. And that usually cuts it off, which is a bit unfair, really, cutting it off there. But the explanation, when I get a chance to explain myself, is I'm from an old school DIY system, which when we used to make tapes in our bedrooms and we'd buy the latest Clash album or the latest Damned album or the latest Mekons album, you'd tape it and then you'd pass it on to your friends. So there's always that thing going on in DIY exchanging. And the other thing is, because I've enjoyed myself so much in the system, I just wanted to put something back in.
You do put a lot back in, because you've built up quite a collection.
It's nice of you to say that. And
but that leads on to another question I have for you, actually, because you contribute in your artwork and in the packaging. And can you tell me a little bit about the logo? Because that's a fantastic T-shirt. I have that T-shirt, and I wear it with great pride.
Yes, you do. And
I display it on my TOPH TV as well.
And you're one of the few people who have this T-shirt.
I have got that T-shirt.
And actually paid for it.
I did.
You
insisted.
You insisted
I've got one of everything for free.
You insisted on it.
To swap
I do recall that. You insisted on giving me the money.
No, you're having it for a T-shirt. But can you tell us a little bit about it? Because it's a really cool logo.
Okay, right.
And then your packaging.
There you are. This logo. My son works in art. And he works,
well, that's helpful.
And he works in graphic design.
Yes.
And I spoke to him about the label I was going to set up.
Yes.
And I gave him Rob Ayler's article. Mm-hmm. And I also gave him a couple of tapes and some of my photographs. And I said, what can you come up with that? And this is what he come up with. And when I looked at it, because I'm not really an art person, I looked at it and I said, oh, yeah, that's quite nice. He says, do you get it, Dad? And I said, is it obvious? He said, well, it should be. It's not to me, Tim. Tell me. He said, your tapes. If you look there and there, Dad, they're tapes. Those are the tapes. So I said, all right, I quite like that. So that's how that came about, that logo. I've had a bit of difficulty keeping the logo going, because one of the things I've had to talk to Tim about is the font is not a normal font, and I don't know what font he uses. So we can't do variations so easily. So branching off a little bit, when you do see TQ-NAUT, the TQ, which goes here, is slightly different font than that, because we couldn't get that font. And of course, what a graphic designer's like, they always want to keep possession of their own things. So he wouldn't actually release the font style. Well, that's how this came about.
Well, I'm going to ask you about TQ-NAUT in a minute, but can you tell us a bit about...
Finish, yeah?
Well, I've got another question for you. Right. Can you tell us about the packaging, though? Because the packaging on your tapes it's incredibly unique.
It's done at home with cut and paste techniques, lots of sticky back plastic, lots of photographs, and just trying to find something on the night which actually is a bit of an archive for that show. So, for instance, we recorded up at I recorded something up at Gosforth Park Hotel. And I think it was Drooping Finger and a few others were there. Theo Gobbins was there.
Okay.
Territorial Gobbins,
Yeah.
Gobbins, yeah. And our friend Jamie came in and announced that he'd found some stuff for me, and he emptied his jacket onto the table, and it was full of envelopes, and the envelopes were from Gosforth Council, and so I used those as the packaging for the actual item. So, and I think also I probably included, and here's a little clue for you pot pickers out there, I also included a picture of the comic strip from Viz of Ravy Davy. You make your own connections on that. Now, I have managed to transfer some of those packaging ideas to some work I've done with TQ-NAUT, and that is the Cup and Rings performance, which was a NAUT item, but it's now had a TQ-NAUT release. And to help with that, it's got hand rubbings of Cup and Rings from Northumberland.
Beautiful.
And that,
they are beautiful.
A full day out, walking across the moors with a bag of charcoal and A4 paper doing rubbings. Great day out, fantastic.
It's a beautiful project, a beautiful piece.
Some of the TQ-NAUT releases have become, particularly in COVID, have become a little bit sort of isolated one-offs. So, for instance, TQ-NAUT 121, could be 120, is a day out that I had with Lee Stokoe. And we went to visit Throcklingham Church, because we're both interested in church gravestones. But the thing about Throcklingham is that it's got behind the church a deserted village, which was deserted during a visit from a sailor or a soldier who was carrying typhoid.
Ooh.
And he passed it out into the village, and everyone died, and the village passed away. So there was a COVID sort of 19 connection with that. And now we made a recording of the actual experience around the gravestones, and I've done that as a field recording and made a little box set, which I've got to give to Lee at some point. Very interesting graveyard.
So you are making this incredible archive, but also each release, it is unique, and you have a certain number of editions for certain releases. Is that right? Would you say that that's quite...
Oh, no.
That's a fair observation?
Right. There are some numbers of editions which are limited, but they're very few and far between. I can't actually tell you any which are limited at the moment.
Well, there's a lot to remember.
But it's... What it is I have the folder of the tape, the master tape. I have all the pieces from the night, and if someone gets in contact with me, a little plug here, David Howcroft, D Howcroft, is it D Howcroft? No, howcroft.d@gmail.com. I will then send you through the post the tapography which I've got of a list of all NAUT tapes. You can go through it and you can choose any you want. Then what I do is, if you choose 46, I go to my file, I get 46 out, I make a copy, and then I knock it up at the table, then I put it in the post. No cost to you whatsoever.
You're an absolute legend.
And the only thing that happens to me is that people get back into the exchange back again.
Yeah.
So I'll send them something and they will send me something back, which is really, nice to receive. It's always nice when you get something through the post you're not expecting. So, for instance, there's a guy who lives in Spain at the moment. He's Polish, and he sends me tapes through the post. And when they come, they're most unexpected, but they're a real pleasure to receive.
Of course.
And he's only ever had 2 or 3 NAUT tapes, but he sent me more back in return. So it's like an exchange, really.
Yeah.
There's a way forward with the idea of tape exchanges again.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's certainly a strong currency in our scene. I think it has been for a long time, and it's coming back in a really pleasant way.
Well, that's interesting because there's nothing nicer than when you go into a venue and you sit down or you're walking around and someone comes up to the table and gives you a tape. Not a tape which is left in a box on the side which you can take. They actually come round and give it to you in hand.
That's one aspect of Tusk this year that I'm going to miss.
Yeah.
I think the social network of Tusk are coming together of like-minded people and people who become friends and only meet up once a year over that weekend.
Yeah.
And this thing that David's mentioned about giving people stuff and the exchange and not expecting anything in return. The programme for Tusk and Tusk Fringe this year is incredible, absolutely incredible. However, I'm going to miss the companionship.
We all agree. We all agree.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad that Tusk Fringe and the main Tusk Festival are really going to go ahead. I think that the COVID-19 lockdown, it presented an idea to people, an option. Do we do this or not? Do we postpone or do we really go for it and make something happen? And I've seen a lot of festivals kind of go, actually no. And there are always reasons. There's always reasons. And money is a big one of them. And then there are other places that have gone, okay, what can we do to make this absolutely awesome? And I feel like Tusk Festival's really grabbed it by the horns like this year.
I mean,
it's not perfect. It never could be in these circumstances.
No.
But I think it's going to be a good ride. A solid 2 weeks.
It's going to be the longest and biggest ride of the 10 years. And I think for me, I've got no doubt that the main organisers, including Lee and Haz, yourself and Joe, initially thought, this is the 10th year and look what's happened. But I think the organisers have grasped it, and this is going to be a really special 10th year Tusk.
I think so, yeah. I think so. And given the circumstances as well, bloody good effort.
And the problem, I think also the problem which we have is the scene, whatever that might be, is very tactile.
We have to be though.
And that's what helped me. Mm-hmm. The fact that the scene's tactile was a big buying-in point for me coming back to listen to music. The fact that it's welcoming and it caters for other people and shows that humanistic side of things. Whereas sometimes you can go to some places and you are just a figure and a number on a ticket going into a bit. Tusk is not like that. You've got everyone going in the hall, but then there's people coming out and talking, and you're always chatting and passing information on and learning things, and that's how we develop as people.
I remember the first few times I met you at the original Old Police House in Gateshead, and we had some gigs and just went outside and said hello, and we're all talking, and you're going, who's this 20-something woman coming up to us?
Well, that I do remember that, and it took me an hour and 40 minutes to get from my car to go to your door.
It was.
And
oh my God, I feel so guilty.
I stood outside and I knew a few people, and I did. Oh, I'll tell you what, Ben Jones.
Yes.
Ben Jones.
Lovely Ben.
And I got chatting with Ben, and I was reluctant to go in because I have that problem about going into new environments, which is part of the head injury. And I remember you coming out and taking me by the hand and taking me in, but you didn't just take me inside, you made me a cup of tea. And you also found me a chair. You immediately spotted me needs.
I've never had a cup of tea.
Didn't tell everyone.
And then I got my cup of tea, and I'm sat doing my cup of tea, and I'm looking at the fireplace, and I put my cup on the fireplace, and the next thing I'm looking at, fucking hell, it's Fred Dibner. Fred Dibner was looking at me.
We had some weird artwork in that room.
You don't know. I don't know if you know this, but my dad was at school with Fred Dibner.
Oh my God.
And the story that my dad tells me, and this is funny. Give me time, because this is funny. You'll like this. Right? The story. My dad and Fred Dibner and the rest of them were in college, Bolton Tech.
Yeah.
They are Peter Kay reference there, Bolton Tech. And when they finished, they used to go out down into town and catch the buses home. But Fred Dibner says to my dad, "Hey, Lawrence, do you fancy coming with me going out tonight?" And my dad says, "Oh no, I didn't fancy going anywhere. I've got to go home." So my dad went home. Next day, in the papers was a picture of Fred Dibner, and he climbed to the top of Little Lever chimney stack by himself, and that was and he'd had to be escorted off and home.
God.
And that was Fred Dibner's first time as a steeplejack.
That's mental.
My dad could have been a steeplejack with Fred Dibner. Instead, he chose to make professional. He was a professional cabinet maker and made cabinets in the style of Thomas Chippendale.
In the style.
In the club style.
Well, before I move on to TQ-NAUT, I've got one more question to ask you, David. Someone mentioned something about 041.
Ah.
Can you tell us a bit about this?
Well, Miriam, I'm really pleased you mentioned 041 because I'm not going to say anything about 041. I'm going to bite my lip and say nothing. But I'm going to do two things for your audience. The first thing is 041 is Morrison Blockader. And then you have helped me through the old police house and Looker Boy tapes and Punk Scholars Network to transform from Morrison Blockader because someone took exception to Morrison Blockader being used.
Somebody did.
So, I am now Tesco Blockader.
Yes!
And we all know that Tesco Blockader is a nod and a wink to Throbbing Gristle. And if you want to know more, search out the Punk Scholars Network, which I believe is a film.
It
which
is
I
a
must
film.
try and get a copy of.
We're going to get you.
Because that is my final transition into the Tesco Blockader.
Indeed, and it was a cracking morning, that.
All you have to do, pot pickers, is get in touch with me on my email for the second time, howcroft.d@gmail.com, and you can have a copy of 041.
So TQ and NAUT, they've got very different pathways. So how come you two ended up collaborating together? Is there a story behind this?
There is really. I mean, I can. It was in June or July 2017, just after I'd put out TQ1. I went to see Demo Suzuki's network at Clooney 2 in Newcastle. And I saw this guy. I wasn't sure if he was recording Suzuki or if he was just taking pictures at the side of the stage. And I mean, obviously, one scene never forgotten. He's quite an impendent figure, is David, an imposing figure. A few days later, I saw the same guy at the debut performance by Pinnell, Lindsay Duncanson. and that was at I think that was at the Workplace Gallery. And as is the case with all of these things, there was a handful of people there. I was actually given away TQ-NAUT, TQ Zine 1 on the door, or there was a pile of them there for people to take. And if they wanted to donate, they could put a few pennies in the box. Anyway, there's David with his recorder and a copy of TQ. And I went to ask him what he thought of the Demo Suzuki gig, which we both thought was great. And the rest, as they say, is history. I asked him what he was doing with this recorder, and he told me. He said, "Oh, are you the guy behind this fanzine?" And he subscribed there and then. He was one of the very first people to actually cough up money. And we came to an arrangement. We weren't friends at that time, but we came to an arrangement that, and it goes back to this exchange thing.
Yeah.
David said, "Well, look, why don't we exchange my note tapes and your TQ?" So we did that for a little while, and then we started to meet up, didn't we, and have a coffee.
I think what was happening, because I don't recall. I definitely recall the Dynamo Suzuki experience because I went and taped that show, but I don't recall Andy seeing me there. But I do recall the Workplace Gallery over in Gateshead, which I think by this time was being started to be managed by the old police house. But I think the performance was put on by Joe Murray. He'd been the creator of that night. So I recall getting there and going through, and on the door, sure enough, there was a TQZ. Andy thinks it might have been TQ1, but it wasn't. It was TQ2.
Oh.
Because I had been given a copy of TQ1 by Martin Gregory and Jamie from the Blythe scene, effing amateurs people. So I picked it up and I was reading it when Andy came across and introduced himself, and I introduced myself. And I had just started NAUT, and Andy had got TQ underway. So we were two new items starting up, and I think we just decided to share information.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the deal was Andy would get a copy of every NAUT tape that was made, and I would always get a copy of the TQ-zine. And Andy was aware that the NAUT thing was very much the idea of an archive.
Yeah.
So I'm sure Andy's got his own archive of TQ, but I've got also an archive of TQ which has more or less everything in it that's been released. So I've got that going as well. And then I think I'm right in thinking we had some. You were the one. I'm pretty sure you were the one who suggested get in touch with Rob Haler for me to use his phrase, and that's was us meeting and sharing ideas together.
Yeah, and for a while, Ash Cook had been saying to me, "You know, Andy, you're not just putting out fanzine here." Because of the free discs that you give to subscribers, you're almost running a label. And it was, for me, it felt like a throwaway comment, but I think in hindsight, Ash had a point.
Yeah.
And I really felt at the time that because of the synergy between NAUT and TQ and the synergy between David and I as individuals, I just thought, and David was obviously thinking along the same lines, we could do something together here. So we were meeting to have coffee in town once a month.
Well, I think if I remember rightly, that was strengthened when I decided after the Tusk of 2018 to do the Nurse with Wound package because I
That's
launched
right.
it.
That's right.
I actually launched it in a review of
That's
the
right.
Nurse with Wound gig at Tusk,
Yeah.
and we started talking about how that I might work that and how it might unfold,
Yeah,
and that brought us closer together with ideas.
it did. Yeah, it did.
Because the final result of that was that Ash Cook participated in it, and he came up to Tusk for the exhibition.
Yeah.
I exhibited all the returns.
That's
I mean,
Yeah.
likes of yourself, there was, I think in total there was 21 or 23 returns.
Yeah.
And so I spoke to Lee and said, look, this is what I've got. What's the chance of coming in and exhibiting?
Yeah.
Which he agreed to. And then Ash Cook came up and performed.
Because Ash had used the Nurse with Wound project to
Yeah.
create perforation function.
That's right, yeah.
And
Yeah.
at Tusk, Lee invited Ash to come up and perform it.
So all that, us doing that, really brought us closer and closer. It was almost like drawing us closer and closer together.
Yeah.
But I
Now-
mean, you both work in two different mediums, but you have got a lot in common,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
and you have
Yeah.
like that common interest. But you also have something else that's quite in common. I hear about your interest in catalogue numbers. Okay, because there's a lot of numbers going on.
It's his fault.
It's his fault.
It's his fault. I'm not into factory records.
Yeah.
The numbering thing is
Yeah,
a bit of
yeah.
an obsession.
It is.
I think
I'll get my coat now.
I think the first release was St James Infirmary. I think on the label, and that was given the number TQ-NAUT. We both have a strong affinity to the way that Tony Wilson and Factory Records labelled everything they did. Everything.
Yeah.
Buildings, albums, singles, posters, gigs, blah blah. And we thought at the same time we had this idea, why don't we follow that lead? So we give everything a catalogue number, whether it's a physical release or not. David and his wife live at TQ-NAUT 23. Joe and I live at TQ-NAUT 0. During lockdown, I really got into bacon. And, I tweeted a picture of 13 cheese scones.
Yeah.
Chris Whitehead
Yeah.
said it looks like they should be TQ-NAUT 133. So sure.
And you know
it is.
what? Even I don't have one of those in my archive.
No, yeah.
Not one.
So
You've eaten them all.
So everything gets a catalogue number, including gigs. Sadly, due to COVID, the idea of putting gigs on has had to go on the back burner for some time. But we put a couple of gigs on. They were given numbers.
Yeah.
We give a catalogue number to a letter which we constructed for Wire magazine.
Yeah, Wire magazine.
About being hobbyists.
Yeah, they printed that, but they did not print
No,
the
they
catalogue number. The idea was that we'd see a catalogue number attached to the letter. They printed the letter in its entirety.
Yeah, that's right.
Which was a response to a feature that Rob Hale had written about hobbyism. And he was quite right in what he was saying. And we had a connection with Rob's article, so we thought we'd respond, but give it a catalogue number. But the catalogue number, unfortunately, wasn't printed.
We also have got. We've got to the stage where if someone who's part of the TQ-NAUT community, as in they follow the label or they're on the label, and something happened as a recognition, we create hand-painted stone and put it in packaging and send it as a reminder. that they're not alone. But even all of those have a catalogue number, and there's only one, and that's just to the person that it's made for.
Yeah, I mean, the painting of stones has been on for a long time now. But one of the things during the early months of COVID, I would go for early morning walks in the woods in Northumberland, and I'd see these painted stones that kids and adults, no doubt, had left behind. And anyway, there was, without going into detail, because I don't think that would be fair, there has been, I think, 3 occasions where we felt it appropriate that David paint a stone and send it to someone as a reminder that they're not alone, and our positive wishes are with them.
And the stones are picked on my walks in Northumberland from riverbeds or from George's Bale on the coastline.
Oh, that's really lovely.
It's quite therapeutic to actually paint the stone as well, even though it's done with a shaky hand. But our label obsession with catalogue numbers has caused a bit of a blip just recently, and that is TQ-NAUT 55,
which we're not going to fight about.
Which is a release, which is imminent by Sinan.
Yep.
Which is Darren Holloway and his friend, and there's TQ-NAUT 55, but just recently I got notification that there's TQ-NAUT 55C, which is a limited edition cassette. But there's nothing there about what TQ-NAUT 55B is. And when I emailed Andy to ask him this question, all I got back was, interesting.
maybe TQ-NAUT 55B is an idea that can't actually be seen. We could maybe start labelling ideas.
Well, now there's one for you. If you've got an idea and you want to have it 55B, get in touch.
By the time you see this, 55B.
In fact, at some point we'd like to release something. This is a bit over the horizon, where someone goes, bloody hell, they've done what? They've released what?
yeah,
that's an idea, it's in progress. Slowly.
We have got a few ideas.
But you are very busy, even in lockdown. There's a big workload.
Yeah.
And you're doing a lot. I mean, you've got other people chipping in bits and bobs, haven't you?
Yeah, we have.
But how is it still going?
Well, that's Andy.
Under the COVID-19
well, that's Andy,
restrictions and
the
lockdown.
engine house is Andy.
Well,
there.
It hasn't been easy to keep going through COVID. One of the real challenging things was I have a very, very simple written agreement with any artist, and that's for their welfare as well as ours. And one of the very important things is intellectually the music is theirs. And that's one of the things that we make very clear in the agreement. When drawing up the agreement, I tried to allocate a release date. COVID threw that out the window because the duplicating plant we used was furloughed. David and I were isolating. There was a lot going on.
Yeah.
Well, our meetings were on telephone, weren't they?
Yeah. So the release schedule sort of like it slowed down from about March through to May or June time, and then we gradually ratcheted it up again. And David, one of the things that David is very good at is reminding me to slow down. Otherwise, I'll just be swamped with work. I call it work.
Well, I believe there's a thing called burnout, and you don't want to have burnout.
No, but we do have some good people working with us behind the scenes, who David and I felt very strongly that although we front the label, if you like, these other people are as equally important to the functioning of the label as what we are. And just to name check those people, we've got Darren Holloway of Sinan 55 C and B, or 55C. Darren, he is the along with Ash Cook, they are the engine. In the background, they keep their two main tasks, if you like. But we're trying not to delineate about who does what, because we're all in it together. But what they're very good at, that David and I are not good at, and we have no interest in, is being the interface between the label and the duplication plant, and also keeping the label's Bandcamp site up to date. David mentioned earlier that he's not an artist, if you like. I'm not. Ash did a fantastic job for the first several months with the Bandcamp page. He's also very active. He's got his finger in a number of pies, and he wanted to sort of like take a lesser role in the Bandcamp page. So him and Darren now work on that. Darren revamped it, and it looks really attractive.
Yeah, it does.
I contacted all the artists to tell them how COVID had affected the label. Every single one of them said they understand, there's no pressure to put the release out. And I gave them an opportunity to go elsewhere. They all said, no, we like the way you work, we want to stick with you. So we're now moving on. It's about 3 releases a year. And we've got a month. And we've got a full schedule now up until, I think it's the end of February next year. But we've got stuff. The artists are wanting to release stuff later in the year, so we've got stuff scattered throughout the first 6 months of next year.
I think there's something really interesting about the DIY, about this no audience underground, and about our scene across all the different formats, whether it be tapes, zines, gigs, performances, making albums.
Yeah.
We have gone through COVID-19 lockdown. It's been global. We have all been affected by it, which we had a quick chat about earlier.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you think, but I've seen personally, as the Old Police House and as Mariam, I've seen lots of different artists from the DIY, the experimental, across all the different art forms, find a way.
Yeah.
Find a way, and the currency's changing. It's not just about money. They found a way to do something. They found a way to share. They found a way to make something happen. And I see that in what you're both doing.
And that's related to creativity.
It is related to creativity.
Because it's creativity in a different way than painting creativity or sculpture. It's creativity about finding ways and means to do things which normal routes can't deliver.
Why do you think that it comes from our scene? Why do you think it comes from our groups?
Because we're not motivated by how many books we can make from it. We're motivated because we want to spread the love. That's what it's about.
We're people. That's what I think it's about. We are people.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably fair to say that everything that we're doing, if you speak to a business guru, they'll say, well, this is a business model. The only difference is, I think the majority of businesses don't succeed unless they make a profit. We're actually succeeding dramatically by not aiming to make a profit. If we were doing what we do and we had to make a profit, it wouldn't be fun. I've worked for 45 years. Some of it was fun, but I didn't do it because I wanted fun. I'm working just as hard now, but I'm being paid in the joy of doing it.
Yeah.
We've always said that doing the label, the fanzine definitely doesn't make money. NAUT, the tape archiving, definitely doesn't make money. David and I said from the word go that if we were fortunate enough for the label to make any money, what we'd do was we'd create a pot that we would use to help artists that don't have the financial means to do so, to get product out there. We also came from the premise that this venture, the label, we're not interested in making any money. We don't need, not that we're rich people, we're not, but we don't need this to be a money-making venture. Then it becomes a business and not a fun hobby. But we know that there are people out there who are real creative beings and yet need some financial support to get their work out there. So we have created a pot of money and we've got ideas about what to do with that. Some of the artists that are released on the label, in the agreement where in the final agreement, the artist has said, keep any profit that you make, put it in your notional pot to help other artists. And this is happening more and more. There are some artists that come to us and I can almost detect that they haven't really got two pennies to rub together. So from the first draft of the agreement, I'm saying, and David supports me, and David lets me front that side of the label up. I'm saying, once the label has recouped its outlay, because there is outlay, we don't charge for our time or anything, but the main outlay is getting the CDs duplicated and getting the covers produced. And one or two releases have had badges, cards, and this sort of thing attached.
The cool stuff.
The cool stuff, yeah. And there's more and more of that hopefully coming. But once we've recouped our initial outlay, every penny of profit will be deposited into your PayPal account as the artist. And the artists have been grateful for that. And that's all we want. Thank you. We don't want anything more. But what we are finding is that we've got several people who are completists and they are buying everything the label puts out. Now, that's fantastic. But I also think it's a measure of the quality of stuff that we're putting out there.
Of course.
And whereas before, in the initial stages, we were knocking on artists' doors saying, we're starting this label. Things have turned now. We're getting people approaching us.
Of course.
And not just on the local scene. Internationally.
So, I've got one more question. One final question. What's on the horizon for TQ-NAUT? Is there anything that you want to share with us about the future?
Well, we've already shared one thing, and that's the idea that we've got the thoughts of putting together a project in which we're hoping the response is going to be, they've released what? Or have you seen what they've gone and done?
What have they done and done?
What they've done now.
Released now. We like that idea, but we don't know what that's going to deliver, but we're working on it.
Okay.
And the other thing is, we did start with an ambitious project to start putting some bands on. And we'd gone to Stars in Shadow and done something there. We'd gone to the pod at the Glass Centre. But in the background, we were working on taking on board the St Mary's Lighthouse for what is known as a stranding, and that is where once you're on while the tide's in. So we are keen to look at some unusual venues or some unusual ideas to do with promotions of bands. We're interested in that. And I've just come off the back of an experience with BRB, Kevin Wilkinson's, the simulates.
Mm-hmm.
And I attended a Simulate 2 and a Simulate 3, and I liked that idea. So I'd like to think that at some point in the future, on the horizon or just over the horizon, is a tasty venue, which will be a bit quirky and unusual.
Sounds good to me.
And this idea of this other release, of they've done what?
Yeah.
Those are things that are on the way in some shape or form, but whether they actually come to fruition, who can tell?
Yeah, we've also, and David knows some of this, but not all of it. Our fastest release in terms of selling was a guy who performs under the name Tapes and Tubes, Austin Potter. I think he's from Philadelphia. This is a guy who I've followed for, I don't know, a couple of years, and he should be huge. We released his album, Sugar Bushy, and it sold out. I mean, okay, it was only a print of about 30 or something, but it sold out within hours. So I contacted Austin because I've liked all of his stuff, and the fact that he was happy to release Sugar Bushy through us, and it's the only release we've done that I've had emails, people saying you don't happen to have one sneaked away that I can buy.
Yeah.
And the answer is no,
Yeah.
I haven't. However, Austin has agreed to release my birthday next year a package which includes everything that he's recorded and everything he's released,
Ooh.
including Sugar Bushy and a new album. Now that is something to look forward to.
Yes,
This guy's unique and should have a wider audience. And David and I always said that one of the reasons for the label is to give people who we think should have a wider audience that wider audience. And I'm pleased to say that we've been very successful. So that's something else to look forward to. But we can't wait for COVID-19 restrictions to be relaxed even more so that we can really get to grips with this idea of promoting gigs. We were in discussions with the 4-piece local band before COVID about helping them market and sponsor a mini tour to get their work more known in the Northeast. I mean, we'd like to think that the mini tour might have been not just the Northeast, but then you're starting to talk serious money in terms of hotels and travel and all that. We're not there yet, but we like to think that that's still on the back burner. So not just putting on one-off gigs, but where we have the wherewithal and the enthusiasm, because we've got to like the band.
Yes.
And although we're not going to name names, this band is a band that David and I have a great affinity and love for.
That's good. Oh, mint.
Yeah.
It sounds so optimistic.
Yeah.
And it's so important at this time to have that, I think.
Yeah, I
it's
think
so brilliant.
But I think, something we've touched on during this discussion is what motivates us and how things been during COVID and all of the fragments of the DIY scene and Tusk Fringe, what it means, and the main Tusk, what it means, and how it's going to be different this year. But one of the things that I've found as part of the DIY scene and part of the No Audience Underground scene is the mutual support that just glues the whole thing together. We talked about the financial side of it.
Yeah.
One reason why there are no egos and the mutual support is there is because money doesn't really come into it.
Yeah.
I know we've got to front certain things and hope that we get a return on that. But I think a lot of stuff in the DIY scene is built upon the fact that it can be done without making a profit.
Yeah.
And long may that continue. And I think if there's one good thing as a result of this bloody worldwide pandemic, is it's given more people a chance to think outside of the traditional business model.
Yeah.
Whether it be on the music scene or not.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think we're at a really interesting place now where we're going to look at how we can move from working in this not-for-profit into something equitable, into how can we all be supported overall by the government, how the arts can be supported in a better way.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, is when it's come down to working under extremely difficult circumstances, some people have come out with a lot of stuff and some people haven't. And I don't mean artists.
No.
I mean organisations and groups making things happen.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to it, the DIY, I don't think it stopped for a heartbeat. I
No.
think a lot of people went, yeah, I'll just do it that way instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you're both very good proof of that too.
Yeah, we hope so.
Oh no, definitely are.
I mean, I think the only couple of blips that we've seen in what David and I do with the label is, we were meeting face to face at least once a month.
Yeah.
We continued those meetings, but they were by telephone.
Yeah.
And secondly, as I mentioned earlier, the release schedule went into chaos, but we're now back on track with that. So, where there's a will, there's a way. It's a cliche, but it's so true. If you want to do something, get on and do it.
Thank you, NAUT. Thank you, TQ Zine. Thank you, TQ-NAUT.
Thank you.
That's the one. Thank you,
Been a
Amelia.
pleasure.